since we're talking about Tylenol and you guys love history, some of you guys weren't here 2 years ago. So let me tell y'all about Tylenol. And let me tell y'all about the Chicago Tylenol murders of 1982. This is a crazy piece of history, all right? Crazy piece of history. For those of you guys who are unaware, in Chicago in 1982, people started dying, and they couldn't figure out why they were dying. They knew that they seemed to be poisoned. They weren't sure why. Nobody really knew why they died, at first, and it just seemed like it was coincidental, okay? Seemed like it was coincidental, but nay, it wasn't. So what happened? Back in 1982, we started seeing people die. First one was a 12-year-old girl. Then there was a 27-year-old guy, 25-year-old guy. They all started dying around the same time in different areas, but they were kind of concentrated. So nobody could figure out why they were dying. Nobody could figure out why anybody was dying. It was just a random death. But then all of a sudden, the first coroner did an autopsy. Turned out, potassium cyanide, okay? Potassium cyanide. What the fuck? Why is there a 12-year-old girl, a 27-year-old guy, another 25-year-old guy, and a couple other people dead from potassium cyanide poisoning? Like, one would be like, okay, but how are these people? And they're not, and there's no connection. They had no connection. They weren't related. They didn't know each other, nothing, but they died of potassium cyanide poisoning. So then it was about, how do we figure this out? So what did they do? They went into their homes, they checked it. They did a whole fucking, a whole episode of House. Remember when the House used to go to the people's actual houses and check and stuff like that? They did that. And what did they find a common connection? They all had extra strength Tylenol. That's the only thing in common. So, well, I mean, that's okay. A lot of people have Tylenol. Talk to the parents. Yeah, that person had a headache. They had pain. They took the Tylenol. Okay, well, it's Tylenol. So it can't be all Tylenol. Not every fucking pill of Tylenol in the country has cyanide on it. So how do we figure it out? So they tracked it back to one pharmacy. And it turned out that this ended up killing 12 people. And they had all bought extra strength Tylenol from a single pharmacy. Okay? Well, they didn't have cameras back then. So how do we figure this out? So they go do an investigation, they start looking into it, and they look into a couple of them, and it turns out some of the bottles had been tampered with. Now, back then, they only had those capsules, right? The ones that you can separate, the plastic ones. So what they determined is that someone was going into the pharmacy, buying these, going out, and probably had one of those like little boxes that had like all these little holes, and putting the capsules in them, taking them, emptying them out, and putting the potassium cyanide in them, reclosing them, putting them back in the bottle, and putting them on the shelves. Now, back then, they didn't have like the seal and the little cotton in there. It was just a bottle. No cameras, no nothing. So that's how they determined that somebody was actually killing these people. Here's the problem. Is it just this pharmacy? Is it this part of the city? Is it the whole city? Is it the whole state? We don't fucking know. So they rose the alarm. Nobody else is buying Tylenol, extra strength, whatever like that. And guess who was a real fucking loser here? Johnson & Johnson, a company I bring up a lot of time with stuff that kills people in pharmaceuticals. Johnson & Johnson had to recall like 30 million bottles of Tylenol. This cost them, in today's numbers, around $400 million. Not only that, there was some good, I guess, that came out of it. They then had to halt production, reset up all their factories, and because of this incident, we got tamper-proof labels. So if you ever wonder why when you go get medicine, there is, at the top of the bottle, there is a tinfoil seal as well as cotton balls inside, it's all because of the Chicago Tylenol murders. I'm sorry, packaging. Jesus Christ. The reason that we have tamper-proof packaging, thank you, is because of Tylenol murders. Now, they never caught the guy. There was a time when someone, their number one suspect, was a guy who actually mailed a letter to Johnson & Johnson headquarters demanding $1 million or to stop doing what he was doing. Dumbass that left his DNA on it. They tracked it back to him. They arrested him. It was determined that he probably didn't have the capability to do this, and he was just trying to get the money out of the extort them for money. So he ended up getting, going to jail for that, but he wasn't actually charged with that. Number two suspect was actually the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. Now, the crazy thing about this is before he was the Unabomber. They actually had him. They actually had him in custody, right? They actually had him in custody. But they did a DNA test, and turned out that he didn't match any of the DNA. But he was already on the FBI's watch list at this time. And so they actually brought in Ted Kaczynski and DNA tested him and cleared him. Number three was some guy who was a former employee. And this guy ended up confessing. He was drunk, and in like I forgot, like that same year he was drunk and he confessed to doing it, and he got arrested and stuff like that. But then he recanted his confession, and so he whatever. They still think it was the guy that they put in prison. Number one, the first guy who wrote the letter, and he spent like 20 years in prison. And got out in like 1995, and he ended up dying in I think 2022 or 2023. And so people still think it was him, but they never caught the Tylenol murderer, the Chicago Tylenol murderer from 1982. They never caught him. So of course nowadays we have surveillance cameras and we have more forensic stuff to figure this out. Most people think it was the first guy. Lewis was the guy who confessed. Sorry, Lewis confessed. The first guy sent the letter. Okay, I'm wrong. These are two different guys. One I'm trying to think because one guy sent the letter, the other guy confessed. And they think it was him that did it, not the guy who sent the letter. So the first guy sent the letter and they thought he was trying to extort it. Lewis was the guy who confessed to it, and they had physical evidence to it. So this is the guy, thank you to the guy who was reminding me. This is the guy who they think did it, the one who died in 2022 or 2023. Okay, never mind. Let's backtrack. So yeah, number one, Lewis was both of them. I'm thinking there's two separate things that they brought him in for. Lewis, number one was Lewis. He sent the letter. They thought he was extorting. Then he confessed, and they had DNA evidence tying him. That's correct. Thank you, Chatter. For some reason, I was thinking it was two different people, but no, Kaczynski and the third guy is the one I'm confusing it with. Because he was basically saying that he thought it was like corporate greed and like he was going after them and stuff like that. And he signed the letter as the Tylenol killer. I remember that. So yeah, so Lewis sent the letter demanding $1 million, signed it as the Tylenol killer, okay? Even confessed, but then recanted his confession, okay? He actually got convicted of this and spent time, I think. Either way, he got out and he got convicted of something else. Either way, sorry, I went too far and I didn't mean to go that far. I don't want to give you guys bad information. I'm doing this all off memory. But yeah, there you go. So I thought, with Tylenol being in the news, I thought it'd be a good time to revisit the Tylenol murders. There's a Netflix documentary. Really? That actually probably would be something I'd get addicted to watching. The funny thing is that he got convicted. I think he spent 15 or 20 years in prison for extortion for the letter, but never got charged with any of the murders, even though he confessed and recanted and stuff like that. So, but people still believe he was the guy who did it.